What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Mr. Madrid from the Mr. Madrid Show, and today we have a special guest by the name of Vladimir Bautista. He is a gentleman that is the co-founder and CEO of Happy Munkey, a dispensary that's located in New York. There's two locations, one in uptown New York City, Dyckman, and then he has a second location along with his partner over in Fulton Street in Brooklyn. So just want to extend a warm welcome out to Vlad. Thank you for being on the show today, my brother. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Mann. A pleasure to be here and looking forward to speaking to you and your audience.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Just to jump right into it. One of the questions I ask all my guests to kind of get us started, and so people know, the listeners, the viewers, who you are and what you're about. Who is Vladimir Bautista?
Vladimir Bautista is a human being born and raised in Harlem, 139th and Broadway, with two Dominican parents that were immigrants, that has been an entrepreneur in the legacy, we like to call it, we call legacy side before cannabis was legal, and now an entrepreneur in the legal side. And it's just been an interesting journey because get to turn pain into power after being through everything that we've been through, and now finally society and the government agreeing was what I always knew was right, was just medicating and uplifting my community.
Right, right. And the cannabis industry as a whole, and even like growing up in New York City, the stigma has always been very powerful about not doing that type of drug, and like the negative stigma that cannabis has. Whereas now in 2026, we're seeing more and more all the good things that it does for individuals, whether if you're doing it for sickness, for recreational use, whatever it may be. And I'm biased because I think it's a peaceful drug, if anything, right? And I hate the term drug, but we'll keep that as it is for now, right? Um, but it's very admirable what you're doing all around. Now, can you tell us a little bit about Happy Munkey and what that is and how that came about?
Before I tell you that, I'll tell you a fun fact that I just saw the other day. Um,
Yeah.
Last year, insect ants, killed 30 people. So ants have killed more people than cannabis. Now,
Oh, wow.
I'll tell you about Happy Monkey. Happy Monkey is a movement we started. Happy Monkey is a movement we started in 2017. Me and my other three partners. We started by simply knowing that there was nowhere where people could congregate and consume together. So we had one of my partners had a location downtown in 38th Street, and one of my other partners had gone to Amsterdam and seen that whole cafe scene. So we said, you know what, we're gonna invite all our friends and see what happens. And from there, that snowballed really quickly. We started doing an event once a month, then once a week, then 7 days a week, 300 people a night. In 2019, Forbes called us the Studio 54 Cannabis. We knew we were on to
Wow.
something. We knew that it was bigger than just smoking. It was like a movement. So what we did was we had the foresight back then to say, you know what? Cannabis isn't legal yet, but the lifestyle is legal, because before us, the majority of all the brands and all the movements were West Coast based, like California, Oregon,
Right.
Nevada, etc. So it was like there's no lifestyle, cannabis lifestyle company that represents New York. So we were like, you know what, we can't brand cannabis. It's not legal. We could brand the lifestyle. So we started first with a podcast that has over 100 episodes now with all sorts of people from all sorts of industries. Then we went into merchandise and clothing, and then we went into events. And then as legalization started approaching, we went and we started advocating, because we started going to conferences and we started getting in touch with the politicians and the lobbyists. And we knew that it was coming to a helm, like it was going to start being passed here legally. But we had gone to conferences all over the country, and we saw that every time it legalized in another state, there was nobody that looked like us that ended up with licenses. We saw
Hmm.
that the majority would end up with, Chad, Brad, Karen owning it, even though our people suffered the most. Our people carried
Right.
the flag for 80 years, built this, $100 billion industry throughout the country. When it crosses over most places, it ends up going to like more corporate folks. So
Right.
we fought and we did petitions. We did a petition against Cuomo and we got like, thousands of signatures. We went to Albany and we protested and we got vans up there and etc. So, and a lot of other organizations too, like Normal and a bunch of other organizations here that were lobbying too. So we make sure that that didn't happen in New York. So people like us, like myself, I've been arrested 22 times for cannabis, were able to participate in this new market. And that Happy Monkey went from there. That COVID hit, we had to stop doing the events. We started focusing more on the media presence and our advocacy. By the time COVID was done, legalization was on the helm. We applied for licenses. I got one in the one in Manhattan. You set up shop. My partner got one in Brooklyn, and now we're here. We got two retail dispensaries, and the one in Dyckman in Manhattan is the first legal one in history in Inwood in the Washington Heights area.
Amazing, amazing. That's an amazing story. For me, like in hearing the journey that you went through and trying to get into those rooms where you can state your case on why it's so important for minorities us to have a seat at the table too. How was that, man? Like I'm pretty sure there was some resistance that you probably were faced with in trying to get your point across and trying to get, signatures to put up a good fight. Like was that easy? Was it hard? Like how what did that even look like?
You know what? It wasn't easy, but you always hear a saying in Spanish, "El pueblo quita y pone." So the trick that they really would do in every state was they would do things in a hush hush way. So what do I mean by that? Like they were trying to do here, like the meetings they would have about these things. They wouldn't happen in Washington Heights, Harlem, or the Bronx. They would happen in Tribeca and Williamsburg and etc. So it was just simple. Like what when we caught wind, we just kept on spreading the information to all the culture and all the marginalized people in the city and people, New York's not having it. So, it was hard to get the information, but it was easy to spread it because we also were like the arbiters of culture in cannabis. So we had the ear of a lot of influential people in the culture. So once they caught wind of it, everybody was on board. It was just, I
Right.
think their biggest trick is like not letting us catch wind of it, so none of us ringing the alarm.
Damn, man, that sounds like just a reoccurring theme, not just in the cannabis industry, but just as a
That
whole,
is the play. That's the
right? The gatekeeping, like I didn't know you almost like you wanted to know. And I remember reading and seeing videos. Like I was a big fan of the show on Vice called Weed Kit. I'm not sure
yes.
if you're the bomb. And I remember them telling stories of how difficult they were making it for felons or people that were arrested because of cannabis related issues and then them fighting for that. And that was around that time, like the 2021, 2022, I believe, that I was watching that show. And it's just, that's the main thing because being that it was so frowned upon for so long and people serving time for marijuana, getting caught with a couple pounds or whatever it is and then they come out now you're making this legal and you're telling me like I served fed time or whatever it is and I can't have a seat at the table with something that is now legal because you guys say it's legal. So what kind of things were there, like records that had to get expunged or did they, like how did that play out for people that aren't like that want to get into this type of industry, have a record and feel like it can't? How does that work?
So just to be clear, like I mentioned before, this is only a New York State thing because the way
Okay.
that the cannabis industry works, it's not federally legal. It's only legal in about 30 something states, and
Right.
every state has its own laws and its own programs. So New York, because of what we did, has the most equitable program in the whole country. Just to give you an understanding of how foul what they were doing was, New York has more social equity ownership than the entire country combined because they do what I told you everywhere else. So for people in New York, the record won't stop you, but everywhere else it still does. And
Right.
to add to the point about what you're saying about all the people that were arrested, there are still to this day, Muslim Madrid, 40,000 people in prison for cannabis right now to this day because it's not federally legal yet. So there's a lot of people in the feds. There's still people serving bids, etc. It's the hypocrisy of the democracy that Now, like I said, this is projected to be $100 billion industry nationwide within the next 5 to 10 years, and there's still people incarcerated for. In New York, if you have a record, it won't stop you from operating, but there's still other states that it still does. There's still a lot more work to do, a lot more awareness to bring. And that's why, platforms like yours are important because we need to get people to understand what's going on. Because like I told you, my experience has been that that is their secret weapon is not letting our people get access to the information so that nobody can fight against it.
Right. Right. Yeah, and then to tap into that as well, just because I feel like, God willing, this will be huge for the people that are still serving time. There was some news that you shared on your IG story that happened. I don't know sure if it was today or yesterday regarding how cannabis is scheduled. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Today that actually happened. So the government actually officially made it a Schedule 3, drug. So what that means is before it was basically the same thing as getting caught with heroin or cocaine. Now it's
Okay.
gonna be more like if it's a steroid or a lesser drug. And now it'll be acknowledged as something that can be used medicinally. So they'll be able to do more research. There's something called 280E. So what that is even though it's not federally legal, to businesses like mine, we're being charged a ridiculous amount of taxes. And like a normal business can write off a lot of expenses, we can't write off any. So now
Wow.
that will be wiped out is the goal. And also now we can get access to banking because that has
Yeah.
been an issue too, where very little banks are allowed to deal with us. And we can't
Credit
take
card,
double
right?
credit cards, and there's a lot of different limitations we have. But just to give you an example, that is the trick they pull, where like it's a great headline and it is progress, Mr. Madrid, but we still have more fighting to do because it's still not legal. It still won't let all those 40,000 people go from prison. It doesn't automatically change the testing policies for people that have federal jobs where they still can't come out dirty for cannabis and they won't expunge any records. So it's a step in the right direction, but there's still more fighting to do. And that's the mind fuck with this stuff where like they are always like doing a little bit and making it seem like a lot when it's really not the full picture.
It's not enough. It's not enough. And the amount of time, because I remember, I think when Trump came into office the first time, they were presenting that and they were talking about moving, declassifying it as the same thing as like opioids and heroin and all that other stuff. And then that took like, what, 6 years now? More, way more than that. But I'm saying from the moment that I saw it on TV where they were talking about it, and then at one point when they were making it recreationally legal in some states, other states were voting for it, and like there was a lot of hype regarding like is it going to pass or not. And then I think it was Jersey first, and then New York, which was huge. And then down here in Florida, it's the same thing. Like it's been on the ballot a few times, but like anything else, like it's on the ballot today, we're not allowed to vote on it for another couple years again. So it's good that there's strides being made in the industry and in certain states, but I could understand what you mean by like it's a little win, which is huge for the moment, but we still got to keep it going. We can't lose sight of what the ultimate goal is. Folks that are serving all this time for a drug that's now we're finding out is not as harmful, not as dangerous as people made it out to seem for so many years. Like I saw a documentary as well that at one point, and I don't know if this is part of the scheduling, where they couldn't even do research on marijuana. Like it was illegal to
That's
even do
that's
that.
that's one of the things your this new bill that they'll allow a little bit more is more research as a medical plant because we can never find out the 20,000 different medicinal uses that this plant had because they wouldn't let it in the science lab because it was
Yeah.
considered to be like heroin with cocaine. So now there was like millions of people that could possibly be saved by this plant, from cancer patients to all kinds of different illnesses where because Big Pharma doesn't want anybody that is affected with their generic drugs, they were fighting hard to not let it be researched. But just now we're definitely moved the needle in that end. But to accomplish what we were just talking about, the next goal is what they did right now is deschedule it. What they need to do is reschedule it so then people can come out of prison with their records expunged because it's cool that they put it from like what I told you, like severe drug to a drug. But the truth is, reschedule will make it. It's like it's not a drug at all
Right.
because, like I told you, ants kill more people in Canada. So it's just like it's ridiculous without any
Yeah.
evidence how you have it even less than tobacco, less than alcohol, which killed millions of people every year.
Right.
And you're making this seem more dangerous than that.
Yeah.
So it's just like we just have to like get it as normalized as possible to that level because it's ridiculous that it's being even classified as a drug at all. And cigarettes and alcohol is not classified as a drug.
Right. And alcoholism is it's a horrible thing. It's a like I always advocate for I'd rather somebody smoke weed than have a drink because the alcoholism world is a it's just it's throughout my family. So just seeing individuals consume alcohol at a high scale versus if you smoke a joint, you catch a buzz, you relax, you have fun. Like the times that I've been under the influence, I feel like it's almost like everything is a little bit easier. It's easier to cope with. Even I mentioned offline, like I have lupus and arthritis, and even when I came into the world, like growing up in Washington Heights, you smell it on every block, right? Moms is always like, "Oh, stay away from that. It's dangerous." So I grew up like that, thinking that stigma. So I experimented like, usual stuff and as a teenage phase and in my 20s, but I didn't open up to the idea until I got diagnosed. And all the different drugs that doctors try to put inside of you, right? That ultimately fix one thing and mess up another. You start looking into things. And I think it was a book that Jesse Ventura put out talking about the effects of marijuana and the good things. And that's when I started experimenting with it. And ultimately, it does so many wonderful things. The number one thing I would say for pain management, it numbs you. So if you're taking an ibuprofen, and I was taking it at a high dosage, it's messed up my stomach lining, right? Where it's just like it kind of alleviates pain for a few hours. Whereas if you smoke a little bit, it numbs you out, you get the groove, you play some tunes, you start cleaning, you do some positive things while you're under the influence, which I think is beautiful. But as far as for aside from the business aspect of it, personally for yourself, what do you feel about cannabis? What's your sentiment about
So
it?
I'm gonna give you a funny story because I don't know how your audience is. It's okay if I speak Spanish too.
Yes, my last episode, I interviewed somebody who was from Venezuela, and the whole episode was in Spanish. It was the first time.
So I got a funny story for you about what you were thinking about how serious the stigma is. So the stigma is serious just in general in society. I don't gotta tell you in Latino Dominican culture, I don't know if you're
Right,
Dominican, it's like you smoke crack, like you smoke, it's like the worst. So funny story is I remember it was like a month or two when I first opened on Dyckman. There was a señor that he was a Cristiano, right? I didn't know this at the time. And he parked and I was like, oh, he was like, ¿Qué es eso que está ahí? I was like, eso es licencia, like que arriba, la uso adulto en el Alto Manhattan. He was like, eso es el diablo. Eso es lo peor que ha pasado por aquí. Yo no sé cómo dejaron que eso pase aquí. Digo, ¿por qué te dice eso? Dice él, porque eso es del diablo, yo soy de Dios, eso es lo peor. Digo, pero entonces tú prefieres que yo tenga una esquina parado o que la gente tenga que ir para la esquina a comprarlo, que yo tenga que ir a la esquina a venderlo, que yo estoy pagando impuestos, estoy empleando a la gente. No. Dice, no, eso es del diablo. Me dice él a mí, ¿tú tienes hijos? Digo yo, sí, yo tengo una hija. Me dice él a mí, ¿tú quieres ser que tu hija esté ordenando eso? Yo le dije, mire, déjame decir algo. Mi hija tiene 11 años, so ahora mismo no. Pero si cuando mi hija tenga 21 años y yo tenga una opción que ella me salga alcohólica o que use eso, yo mil veces que mejor que use
wow,
eso. He couldn't. He had to respect it. He was like, está bien, mi respeto. But that was just an example of how we gotta create that dialogue with people that think like that instead of just being like, oh, like they don't know what they're talking about.
right,
Like, no, we gotta help them understand because they are dealing with 80 years of stigma and propaganda that has
wow,
been pushed on them about what this is supposed to be. It's only been legal for 5 years in New York. So somebody like me can't take it personal. I just have to stop them, educate him like I did that day. And
wow.
that's how we change things instead of just like rushing them out.
Vlad, I will say I commend you on that too because being from uptown New York City, you know how we could get, man. Somebody challenges us or tries to shit on what we're doing. We're very quick to just snap. So I commend you on the fact that you was just like, let me put you on game real quick and give you a different aspect of this. Because even when people mention your kids, you know that's a route to get defensive right then and there. And it's the same thing for me. Like I have a 12-year-old daughter who I sat down maybe like 2 or 3 months ago. Basically, just kind of, I don't like lying to my kids, right?
Mm.
And I think it's important for them to know because also they're going to be exposed to it at one point or another. And it's always that thing where, and I don't know if, I get shunned by this, but like, if you're going to do something, like, come to me, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it because I'm never going to, put my child in jeopardy. I'm going to school you to it. I'm going to let you know what when and where we can go that down that route. So I think it's important about having open dialogue with just regular people out on the street, and at the same time in your houses, like school your kids to what's what, so that way they feel comfortable having conversation, and it doesn't always have to lead into what the norm is, right? Whereas like somebody challenges the way you view something and it's a clash right then and there. So I think that's very powerful. But getting back to the question about cannabis itself and the way you feel about it, like can you talk a little bit about your experience and the way you feel about the cannabis?
So my experience is simple, you know what I mean? Like I told you, I have a unique perspective because I really believe that I'm only here because of cannabis. Cannabis literally saved my life because, like I told you, I grew up in Harlem, you know what I mean? And I don't know if you know, but in the 80s and the 90s, where I grew up at over there on Broadway in Harlem, it's totally different than the way Washington Heights and Dyckman was. So what do I mean by that? So I always tell people like where I was, it was like talking like Costco or Walmart, cocaine and heroin and all that stuff. Weed wasn't the big thing over there. Like, I mean,
Right,
like, that's what was going on over there. We always had to go to Washington Heights at the Dyckman to get the good weed.
right,
So so I started consuming it at a very young age, at 12 years old, just for fun or whatever. And the reason I feel like that part saved my life because with I feel like there was all this negative stuff going around where I grew up, but me and my little crew was like it was cool if you smoked weed. If you did anything else, you weren't cool. That's why I feel like wait, weed saved my life from a substance perspective, we're not picking anything else up.
right,
Then at 16, I remember we were going to one of the spots on Dyckman to go buy to bring back over there, and I had the foresight and the entrepreneurship to say, you know what? I'm gonna buy an ounce, and if it doesn't sell, I'll smoke with my friends. But I have everything to gain, nothing to lose. This could maybe be my lane because to the guys from my neighborhood, that was like nothing because they were dealing with like large quantities of bigger drugs. But I'm like,
right.
maybe this could be my lane. And I did that and I never stopped selling cannabis ever since. It was in 1998. So why do I say it saved my life? Because if I didn't have cannabis to take care of myself mentally and financially of me and my family, the alternative was at the time to go into selling harder substances or anything like that. And I believe that I would have ended up like 90 to 95% of the people I grew up with dead in jail or
All right.
deported in the Dominican Republic. I feel like cannabis saved my life. So that's why I said that it's a different perspective because even before society knew and the government knew, I knew that it was the least harmful thing. And it was
Right.
actually now looking back, helping me and all my people that I grew up with deal with this crazy environment and maintain your sanity from a
Right.
mental health perspective.
Right. I have a deep question for you. Maybe it's not too deep, but one of the things when I talk to people here in Florida, I wanted to go into the NYPD at an early age, right? In my 20s, took the test and everything. They called me and I chose not to move forward. The reason why is because I couldn't fathom the idea of putting people in jail potentially that lived the same kind of lifestyle that friends of mine and, older, like, the OGs of the block did to survive. So that was always like a tough thing for me that I couldn't digest. I couldn't do it. So I was like, I'm a salesperson. I'm gonna just take my stab at that. Now, the reason that I'm asking you this question is because the battle that I have sometimes in conversation with people is like, when I say that, they're like, everybody has a choice. You don't have to go sell drugs. You could have, studied hard, got a scholarship, got all these things. So for people like that, like, why do because you mentioned sticking to the safer drug, right? But why did you go into that period? why didn't you pursue the life of like a scholar? And I know the answer for myself, and because I've been around that world. So like I'd advocate right next to you as the opportunity standpoint. But for yourself, why do you think you still chose that life versus the school life?
Well, I'll give you my example because, I never like to generalize things because I think that everybody's situation is different. So my situation was, my mother was a single mother, immigrant, barely surviving. They're living in a one-bedroom apartment. Me and my little brother are sleeping in bunk beds in the living room. We're living off of coupons and welfare. So I felt whether it was that way or any other way, I had to step up. I was like the oldest, I'm a middle child, but I was the oldest boy in the house. I had to step up and try to uplift the situation. You know what I mean? Because we weren't living in the best circumstances. And the truth is, on top of that, this is before the internet. I didn't see a doctor. I didn't see a lawyer. I saw the guys outside having everything that I wish I had. And kind of like the only people that were, kind of like moving forward financially. So like in that environment, you don't really feel like there's a lot of choices. Because the only way we can imagine anything different is when we see examples of ourselves in different positions, and at the time, I didn't see any example of myself, people that come from similar upbringing, backgrounds, succeeding in high levels that weren't taking that route, at the
Right.
time. So that was the reason.
I respect that. I've never heard that question being answered like that or that perspective because it's true. I grew up on 179th and Broadway, but I used to go a block over and hang out on 180. Like that was the spot. And we had like a popular, you know, one of the OGs that was a drug dealer that the life that he was living and the things that you saw. And when he would pull up in a Benz or whatever it was, he would always say, like, I did this for us. Like when you see me, I'm doing it for us. So you could see what we could, whether what he did was wrong or right, whatever he was doing, it was still the possibility of like, if he did it, I could do it. And that's the way I live my life now with everything. Anything that I look at, if I see that somebody else did it, it's possible. Like with the hard work and like the drive and all that stuff. So I respect what you said, and I 100% agree with it because we didn't have great role models and examples. A lot of us grew up in single parent homes where all we saw was the perspective of a woman. And to top it off, like there's studies about that too, that as men, we grew up with some of those same emotions that women go through, but we grew up like that because that's all we saw. So we were left to fend for ourselves and find the right to go into manhood. And then as a man, you feel like you have to provide. So like everything you said resonates with me because not that I went into that route, but I respect it and I recognize it because I saw it. So it's very easy to judge in that world. So that's amazing. Now, going back to the Happy Monkey business, like what would you say was the hardest part about building the business?
Well, you have to imagine, right? The hardest part was waiting, having the patience to wait to get the licensing. Then, like having the patience to find the perfect real estate to know what the right investment level is, to get funding. And then last but not least, how to run something that really has no comparables. Because if you go into any other industry, most industries been around for 100 years, 80 years, 50 years. This is
Right,
brand new. So it's all trial and error. There is no like comparables or anything like that. So it and so that aspect, then add on top of it, I believe, this is my humble opinion, that cannabis is the most highly regulated industry in the country.
right,
So you have to like constantly be checking all these boxes that are like if you're dealing with nuclear bombs while you're trying to figure all those other things out.
right.
So the
And you
whole
do
retail aspect of it and the licensing part, that
the
is
hardest part.
definitely not for the faint of heart.
And do you feel like, yeah, I think you kind of answered this in the beginning, but just to touch on it again, you think that's done purposely so to kind of discourage people from pursuing that business?
It's a combination of it's done purposely. Then the other part is from a political regulation perspective, they don't know what they're doing either. There is no 50, 100 years that has been around for them to have known like this law doesn't have this law. They are also figuring it out as they go because they only got 5 years figuring it out. You know what I'm
Right.
trying to say? It's a
Yeah.
combination of that. Plus, they really generally just don't know. So they put laws and put regulations that sometimes don't make sense and can hinder you because they don't know what they're doing yet because it's never been done before from a regulation.
Right.
So it's a combination of both. Of course, there's that aspect that you said about the red tape and the red lining, like they always do, but then add that to it too.
Right, right. And then I know based on like the research that I've done, like you guys are really tied into the community. You do a lot for the culture. It's not just a dispensary. You guys do a lot more than just selling weed. I want to touch on that, but why did you guys pick ultimately Dyckman first and then Brooklyn?
Well, let's start with Dyckman. Right? Dyckman, like I told you, for anybody that's in the tri-state area, that Dyckman and Washington Heights, especially Dyckman, is synonymous with cannabis before legalization.
Right,
Forever. Everybody knows that. So I felt like it was a travesty at the time before we opened. There was probably like 100 stores in the state, and there was probably like, I don't know, like 40, 50 in the boroughs, and there was none up there. So what I thought to myself was like, damn, like, you know how many people died over this plant, got deported. The people up here helped build New York is estimated to be a $5 to $8 billion a year industry. These blood, sweat, and tears will build this industry because that didn't happen 5 years ago. That happened in the last 80 years when all these people were sacrificing building this
right,
industry. So now there's not even a store in the neighborhood. So now the people don't get to access the plant, patient, the tax benefits, the employment. So now they're reducing what you just said that you agreed with an example. So now the kid on the corner that's still hustling, that's still selling weed outside says, damn, I know Vlad and his partners were on a corner like me once. Look what they did. I can do it.
right,
Now I've done 3 presentations at the senior centers up here. I did 2 at the Diamond Projects, one at the Community Board 12 aging committee about the medicinal benefits of cannabis in English and Spanish. Now we got all the older folks coming to get stuff for their pain there instead of the
mm,
pharmacy. So we're changing hearts and minds every day. And it was a tough choice because everybody talks that talk, Mr. McGood. But when it comes time that they put a license in your hand, they say you could be anywhere. You could be in Tribeca, Soho, 34th Street, 42nd Street. For you to choose your community and not choose the shiny things that are presented to you and be like, no, like I'm gonna take the hardest route, which is going. People that look like me and you said you're crazy. You're gonna waste your money. That people don't have no money. There's too many spots. Everything you could think of that wasn't gonna work. We had to go against all that and go what we always did it for, which was the culture and the community. And I think it's been the best choice because the truth is that, so many people have the perspective, Mr. Madrid, that the highest level of success in life is whenever we transition from here to wherever we go when we pass away, is that whoever has the highest numbers of zeros in their bank account. I believe that the highest level is whoever has the highest number of zeros of people that you positively impacted.
right.
So, and I'll be honest with you, it's not always peaches and cream that what you have to deal with to keep this going. So you have to have a why and a purpose more than money, or you're probably
Right.
not gonna make it because it's that hard.
That's real, man. That's real. What I would say too is like in looking at what you guys do there in the community and how you're influencing and how you're speaking to people and opening people's eyes that were opposed to it. And for you to even say there's older people coming in, that's also inspiring and moving. It moves me because you know how much the pharmaceutical industry hurts our people. Right. Because we see it, like what, if your parents are like, my mom that they're constantly giving her different pills for this, for that, like one pill that helps her with diabetes, but then it's messing up her liver or something crazy like that. And they're constantly medicating her for whatever it is. And if there's an outlet or a different option, which would be cannabis, but again, the whole thing with gatekeeping and the information not being put out there. But then if you're going out there and speaking and educating people, our people up all over, is very admirable. For
Even from the other perspective, right? Like let's say like people that don't believe that our communities businesses can succeed, that people like us can't operate businesses in our communities and etc. That also changes that aspect too, where they go, or maybe we were wrong. You know, we thought there was no money out there. We thought that those people are not civilized to run something like that. So we also proving that side wrong too, you know?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think they got another thing coming. That's for damn sure. Because I love and I just had this conversation last night. I was in Puerto Rico over the weekend, and I'll be honest, Vlad. Like I never felt. I'm from Chile originally. I grew up in Washington Heights, so
Yeah.
my lingo is Dominican.
Interesting.
Eh,
Interesting.
I-
Why the guys Chileno? That's a
yeah, man. So like I didn't grow up going to Chile. So like Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. Dominicans more I'll say because I grew up in the Heights. Like the pride that you guys have is like no other, right? Like I experienced Puerto Rico, so like I'll say the same about them. Like it's such a beautiful thing to be Latino, right?
and
And
that's one
embrace,
thing.
yeah, and
And that's another
el
thing we
orgullo,
didn't touch base on, my brother, that we also have an education station inside both of our dispensaries in English and Spanish.
right,
And just the fact that I can communicate these things in Spanish and we have access to education in Spanish is so huge. The most underserved market in the country and probably the world in the legal cannabis industry is the Latino market because there are not enough authentic representatives because because of that pride that you just said, Mr. Madrid,
right,
that people won't listen to you if you don't have the cultural competency and you don't have the authenticity to even for them to even hear you out. So
right,
since there's so little of that, there is not much people accessing 4 million Latinos in New York State and like 60 million in the country because there are so little authentic Latino ownership and entrepreneurial representation in this industry.
right, right. And what I think what makes it difficult too is the way that the whole thing about when we grew up was like, oh, you had to go to high school, you had to go to college, do all the times have changed, man. But that perspective of like the respect that businessmen get depending on what you see is difficult to change the mind of people. So the fact that you guys have, and again, and sometimes I go around in circles because I get goosebumps just talking about it. Whereas like you guys are an established business, you're the real deal. And at the same time, you're educating and you're fighting the good fight on multiple angles. The angles that stick out to me the most is one in continuing to be able to operate your business and hopefully, they reschedule the drug. And then at the same time, you're fighting the stigma of what some folks in the community, in the city, in the world feel about cannabis. And so you guys are fighting a good fight on a bunch of different angles. And it sounds corny because people always say it, but in a sense, you're changing people's lives and changing the world. And I think ultimately that's probably one of the things that's going to be your legacy is that you were one of the like the fighters, the warriors that carry that forward as far as you could take it. And what's dope about your story too is that you hustled on the block too. So it's like you're one of us, right? And that's powerful. And I don't know if people see it like that. I always get poetic with when I talk, but it's that, bro. Like you
And
went
it goes back to what I think I was telling you a little bit before we got online. So part of what motivates me to public speak in this space and on a national and an international level. Remember what I told you, this diversity is only mostly happening in New York. So the majority of the rest of the ownership in the country and in the world does not look like us.
right,
So it fills me with pride when they sit me in a panel in Spain, in London, in California, in Vegas, wherever. And the panel is like Bob from Wall Street, Aaron from CP&G, Tom from Coca-Cola, and Vlad from 139th Street. They got a reference at the time because this is one aspect where Vlad has more experience than all of them and is more expert than all of them on the panel.
right, right.
So that I feel like is important because that's a rare case where we get to showcase that with all their titles and all their resumes. This is one thing they don't know more than us, and they're not smarter than us when it comes to this plant.
Yeah,
And without people like me on those panels, they can talk with these big words and these sophisticated words and make it seem like they are
right,
when there's a guy on Dyckman on in the Washington in Harlem that knows way more than them about this plant. not just me, a bunch, but
Right.
they don't have access to these rooms.
Right.
So that's another part that like fills me with pride because I just don't feel like when I'm on one of those stages, like I'm representing myself. I feel like I'm representing the culture. But we have that saying, we don't do it for the cloud, we do it for the culture. I'm representing a culture, a history where every time I follow one of those things, it's not Vlad, 80 years of all the people that got locked up, all the people that are still got locked up, all the people that are deported and etc. that I'm representing up there.
Yeah.
So I take it really serious because I feel like I'm representing more than myself anytime I get on one of those stages because I know all the trials, tribulations, and blood, sweat, and tears that were put in for this industry to get where it is. And for New York to be the highest consuming city in the world and the highest, basically projected to be the highest grossing city when it comes to cannabis in the world is because of all these sacrifices. And I don't take it lightly that I get to represent that.
Yeah, it's amazing. What I will say too is being that you speak our language, and I'm not talking about Spanish. I'm just saying like you know what it
Also,
is to be a,
confidence.
you know what I'm saying, to be from the block. And what's cool about being a New York City kid is that you could put us anywhere and we can relate, right? I never sold drugs in my life, but I could relate to it because you have cousins, you have friends, you have brothers, like all this stuff that you were around it enough to like to know what it is, right? So in the scenario where I tell you about trying to be a cop, I couldn't do it. I have friends, family that are serving time, and I'm just like, and I'm not saying nothing bad about being a cop, but for me, my perspective on it is like, I know that I would do whatever I got to do to feed my family, and I've always said it. If I got to hit the street for whatever reason, I will. I would explore every other possible outcome, but you do what you have to do. So is very admirable. What would you say, like, to somebody who is trying to get in this type of industry? What kind of advice would you give them right out the gate, like, like a golden nugget that could kind of give them a little bit of guidance?
A golden nugget is that do not um think that anybody has this exactly figured out. The best thing is to find a mentor or find someone that is doing what you want to do and go ask them questions directly because unfortunately this is too new of an industry where you're gonna Google your way or chat GPT your way. It's not there yet. So
Yeah.
my best advice would be like to get around people that are doing what you want to do and ask them firsthand and go directly at them and try to get around that that energy and that information. But they say the closer you are to the sun, the more light you get.
Dropping gems. And I think that's very important to say, like, and then for anybody who's listening, anybody who's seeing this, that nugget, that golden nugget that he gave applies to anything and everything. Anything that you may be interested in, get closer to people that are within that. And then I feel like, there's certain industries that there is an excuse on how like it's tough to get into. But nowadays there's so much information out there, so many people that you could reach out. This is a perfect example. I didn't know Vladimir. I saw his work online and shout out to Linda Abar because that's how I
Oh,
found
that's
you.
what it was. You was talking
Yeah.
with Linda.
Yeah, Linda was on my pod a few weeks ago, who's another
That's
hustler,
that's
tremendous
that's
hustler.
she's definitely a super hustler, man. Like, and definitely, she's definitely an inspiration. She's like a Renaissance woman.
Yeah,
She got
she is. She said it
taxes.
on the
She's a
pod.
hospitality. She's got everything going
Yeah,
on, and she's got the energy to win. Man, I love being around her because, like I said, we all iron sharpens iron.
right,
Just seeing how there's more people, Latino hustlers. Honored to meet you now. That's what it is too. That 6, 7 degrees of separation thing is true, and I believe in life, Mr. Madrid. Men lie, women lie, but energy and vibes never lie. When
right,
you start getting around certain energies, you'll attract more of that energy and you also absorb more of it too. Like I said,
right.
so it's important for people to know that the only way things change is if you change three things. You got to change the people, places, and things that you usually do for things to change. If you go around the same people, do the same things, and go to the same places, you're probably get the same results.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I believe in that, and that's why, like, to close out what I was saying before is you need to take the leap of faith in anything that you want to do. I didn't know anything about podcasting. I've said this before. Yo me tiré. I started doing research. I just met Vladimir for the first time, like face to face now. I was doing some research about it to get to know his business, you know, how this came about. I was genuinely interested because I am an advocate of marijuana. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I hope that we get further and further to a place that it becomes the norm. Still regulated because we have kids, and I don't want my kids smoking at a younger age. Once you know they're savvy, their brain has fully developed. Chapalante, like
That's,
no
that's why the legal ones like mine is on point because it's adult use. Just like alcohol, you got to be 21 and older to get in.
right. Right. The last two questions I have for you, and then we'll wrap up. Vlad, thank you so much for your time, by the way. You mentioned something about being in those rooms when you're talking amongst potentially scholars, and you are the voice for a community like ours. I'm interested genuinely in knowing what fuels that part in you that you feel that confidence that you can be in a room like that. Aside from and maybe that's one of the things, but coming from the community and being in that world as well. But there's also, as humans, we have a lot of doubt. You know what I mean? Like we put ourselves down. So how is it that you're able to persevere in a room full of people that may be more educated than you in a scholarship, like, you know, in a school level, education level, but not in the world of cannabis? So what is it about you that really lets you like be confident in a room like that?
I was just talking to a friend of mine about the same topic recently. So what you're talking about is an imposter syndrome. Everybody goes through it to some levels. I went through it a little bit less than other people because I always have had this perspective where I belong anywhere anybody else belongs. So
Mm,
even when I was on the block, everybody used to go to Dyckman in Miami, and I would go to like downtown in Europe because I always felt like if anybody else belongs, I belong. And I've always been a very social person. But even with all that, at the beginning, I was still a little bit awkward being around, like I said, all these workers, scholars type people. One of my mentors is a good friend of mine. Her name is Barbara Payton. She's like super entrepreneur woman. It's one of the first people to build buildings in Soho, big investor in cannabis and et cetera, and et cetera. I remember she was one of the first people to start taking me to these rooms, and I was just kind of like timid. And she was like, "Man, why you walking next to me? I got you in the room. Go do your thing." That's it. And then I'll be like, "No, because I feel like this." She's like, "These people are not smarter than you. They
mm,
just came up in certain areas. They got the fancy titles. They're not smarter than you. They're not better than you, Vlad." And that also helped me get over it. Like I said, I was already a social person that felt like I belonged everywhere, but having somebody like that, reaffirm that definitely helps. That's why I said
right,
the mentorship, because at some level, at whatever capacity, I believe everybody gets their own version of imposter syndrome when you first get into these types of rooms. But I
right,
can tell you personally now, after being in them for a while, these people are not smarter than us. I used to think they were all brain surgeons and rocket scientists, and then now what it is simple. They have access to informations and networks that we don't. Once we have access to the information, we have access to networks, we can do what they do once they get once we get into those rooms and get access to that information. But if you reverse the roles and you put them where we grew up at, I don't think they could do what we had to do to survive.
The last thing I'll ask, and is more giving you the floor here, is there anything that you would like to bring up to mention to close out with that we didn't touch on during the beginning or middle of the interview?
Well, what I can say is that, if you want to know more about me and Happy Monkey, go to happymonkey.com. Happy Monkey with a U. If both of our spaces have our 4,000 square feet, we have a creative lounge that we love to partner with creatives like Linda. That's why she had an event there. Comedy, any community organizations. We are here because we want to be part of the solution for the community, not the problem. So anybody that wants to learn about anything, collaborate in any way, we're here at your service, and we don't do it for the clown. We do it for the culture, and we really like to prove that. So look us up on Happy Monkey on all platforms. Go to happymonkey.com, or just simply pull up to Dyckman and Brooklyn and meet me or one of my partners in person. And we're really people that really are about community and culture. So that's it. Want
That's
people to
amazing. That's
know.
beautiful. And I will say, just to piggyback on that, where you don't get that type of invitation very often. So if I was in New York City and I was watching this, I'd pull up. And if you guys have something positive of value that you would like to showcase, I would definitely take them up on that offer because you don't get that a lot, and that's real, man. And I respect you even more for that. But Vlad, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you. I know that you're a pretty busy man, and the fact that you took the time to speak to me for an hour and change, it doesn't go unnoticed. And I tip my hat to you. I love all the things that you got going on. Next time I'm in New York City, I'll make sure to come through, show some love, man. And we could go have dinner, some crazy, some fly, and check out all the products. Like right now, I know that's something I didn't ask, but what's some of the hot products that you got going on over there? Like that is kind of moving more than
We
off.
got one called Dr. Bean, that's a big seller. We got another one called Sizzle, that's a big seller. Pull up, man, and come check us out. Uh, I want to thank you for having me. I want to thank you for amplifying the voices of people like me and all the other entrepreneurs, because the truth is that there's a big problem in the Latino community that I think you're helping solve right now, and so am I, is that people need to understand, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. We
Mm,
need to be amplifying each other's voices. We need to be collaborating more. We need to be supporting each other more, because nobody's coming to save us.
right.
We don't help each other, we're doomed. We need more
Yeah, man. And
um,
push that pride
help.
aside, man. Reach out to people. Again, I didn't know Vlad. I took a shot. I'm Mr. Shoot Your Shot. That's what I was known for at work. I'll shoot my shot time and time again. If it doesn't go through, I'll on to the next thing, bro. But I don't. I think pride will be one of the things that makes you lose in life more than often. But Vlad, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead. You just say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. To
Okay.
you and your audience, remember, you're too blessed to be stressed. Things will get greater later. You just gotta always choose happy. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.